Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So in today's episode, we're taking a look at a couple of interesting tech cards that are looking to make an impact this upcoming format, causing them to trend on the market as well. Now, some of these cards are things that we've seen come up in the past that have found their way back into the format once again. However, a couple of these are ones that we haven't seen much from before and are making something of a splash in unexpected ways. Let's get started. Alright, so first card up, we have Cipher Delta. Shout out here goes to Darren DL for letting me know about this one early on. He actually let me know about this card a couple of weeks ago, and it's something that has started popping up in the OCG once again. So Cipher Gamma is a card that was very impactful for several years, a hand trap that you could use as long as you have no monsters on the field that could negate any activated monster effect and also give you a couple of bodies. However, Gamma was limited to one, which caused a lot of people to cut the card. Even with having to run the brick of Driver, it was worth running at 3, but when you only have the one brick with one hand trap, it just didn't feel worth it. Delta is another Cipher monster that can make it feel less bad to play that brick, and it's effectively the same card, it just negates spell cards instead of monster effects. Now, shortly after Gamma was limited, we did see some players trying 2 Delta and 1 Gamma instead. Although it was an interesting package, it never really saw that much competitive success. Now, however, the card is starting to pop up in the OCG as a side deck option again, with players running a package of 2 Delta and 1 Gamma. I'm showing a few different side decks from top decks over in the OCG thanks to roadoftheking.com, and even though a lot of these cards are obviously different between lists, the Cipher package is something that popped up quite consistently. Delta can be a very effective hand trap in the current format, negating some really impactful cards including Wanted, Bonfire, and Triple Tactics Talent. In particular, Delta can effectively stop Wanted even during the draw phase, where players will try to use the card there in order to play around Droll and Lockbird. Looking at the 1 month price graph, we've seen the card start to trend up over the last several weeks. This wasn't the card's first time spiking, as it was almost $9 a few months ago, but the card had calmed down in price and it was around $3, but has just recently moved up to around the $6 to $8 range. The thing about Delta is that it only has one printing as a rare from back in High Speed Riders, which came out all the way back in 2015, so this card is literally almost 9 years old at this point. To be fair, the card hasn't seen much in terms of competitive success, but this is still quite a long time and its one printing isn't even a holo yet. For that reason, I would expect to see Delta get a holo upgrade once it starts to see play, maybe as an OTS Tournament Pack Super or maybe even in Rarity Collection 2. Overall, I do think that this card is going to be impactful this upcoming format, so consider picking up a set for yourself to use. I wouldn't invest in too many copies, however, because there's definitely a solid chance that the reprint will drop sometime this year. Up next is a card that we talked about a couple of months ago. It's Soul Release. Now, Soul Release is a really old card that first came out back in Metal Raiders, which is the second core set ever released, and all it does is target and then banish a total of 5 cards from either player's graveyard. This may seem pretty underwhelming, but it can actually be really useful. Banishing key cards from the graveyard such as Garunix and Promethean Princess can really set the Snake Eye Fire King deck back and make it harder for them to play, and they are expected to be a tier 0 deck this format. On top of that, this card is a normal spell, so it's searchable via Triple Tactics Thrust. Soul Release only has one holo printing, a super rare version that came out back in the Secret Forces, the set that introduced Necros to the game, so it's quite a few years old at this point. If we look at the 3 month price chart here, we see that the card has continuously trended upwards over the last couple of months. When we first talked about the card, it had moved to around the $4 to $5 mark. However, due to the card continuing to see competitive success over in the OCG, and with Snake Eye Fire King still not taking any huge hits on the recent ban list, the card has continued its upward trend and now has hit the $10 mark. I do think that this upcoming format, Soul Release, is going to be a really good side deck option. I know that some players are looking at alternatives like Made to Order Mermaid Outfitter, but I think that Soul Release is the best option that's the simplest, yet makes the biggest impact on the game. What is worth noting now is that while the commons used to be bulk, even those printings are starting to move up. There's several different ones, including a couple of different starter deck versions, but each of them is actually now up to $2 to $3. This is a card that a lot of players are going to be looking for this format, so definitely see if you can dig these out of the common bulk at your locals. Next up is a pretty fun one. It's Formula Synchron. This is a relatively old card that's seen a lot of meta usage over the years. It's a level 2 Synchro tuner that lets you draw a card on Synchro Summon and has a quick effect to let you Synchro Summon during your opponent's main phase. Now, this is a card that we've been seeing start to pop up in some Snake Eye decks, particularly those that are choosing to run Jet Synchron. Some Rescue Ace decks chose to run the card early on as an alternative that you could special summon off of the original Sinful Spoils, and it's now popping up in Snake Eye Fire King. It's actually pretty cool, allowing you to combine Formula Synchron with Flamber's Dragon to proc Flamber's Dragon's effect as well as make a Baron de Fleur during your opponent's turn. With multiple printings out, including a common from an OTS tournament pack, you can grab a copy of this card for as cheap as 50 cents. However, the two versions that have seen notable movement is the secret rares as the highest rarity printing of the card. There are actually two secret rare printings available. The first one is from Legendary Collection 5Ds, an older printing that's quite difficult to find. Those are at the top graph there, and you can see the price used to be down at $3 to $5, but it's recently jumped to over the $10 mark. The other is the one from Hidden Arsenal Chapter 1, where this card was a promo that you could pull from those boxes. It hasn't had as big of a jump, going from just $1.50 to now $3, but that's still a double up in price. Aside from these printings, I do think the Ultras look pretty good. The Duelist Saga Ultras I feel are really underappreciated, and the card also has the German Advent Calendar Ultra printing if you're into foreign cards as well. This card is more of just an option, since not all Snake Eye decks are necessarily going to run Jet Synchron. It definitely seems like a bit of a high roll option, which takes up some extra deck spots and makes you run another brick in the main deck, but it does push up the ceiling of what the deck can do. Moving on, we have Nightmare Magician. So this card was something that I think got overlooked a lot with Duelist Nexus. This card definitely has sort of like an anime protagonist ace monster sort of vibe, just one where the card isn't actually too useful in the context of the TCG. There's nothing wrong with the card itself, right? It's a 2500 attack point body with the standard illusion effect of neither monster being destroyed by battles involving this card, but it's also able to let you take control of any monster it battles, and if another monster attacks during either player's turn, it gets a non-targeting destruction for a card on the field as well. The problem is obviously that this is a level 7 monster, so getting it out onto the board can be difficult, especially with not too much illusion monster support available in the game right now. However, we've seen a couple of interesting illusion cards so far. The Chimera deck is something that's caught a lot of people off guard and has performed really well, and Legacy of Destruction is also giving us a new card called Nightmare Apprentice, an illusion monster you can summon from hand by discarding a card, which also searches your deck for any illusion monster as well. Now, with all of the solid illusion cards coming out, I feel like Nightmare Magician is just getting attention as a just in case. If we get some strong enough illusion support in the future, then maybe Nightmare Magician could be an interesting card. Either way, this card's been trending up over the last month or so. It was a pretty cheap card at around $2 each before, but the card is now up to $5 for the secret rare printing, and it looks like it has the potential to continue going up. There is also the quarter century rare printing, but we haven't seen too much movement there. I believe it was around $25 and it's now just up over the $30 mark for that printing. Now, my issue with investing in this card now is that we don't know when that illusion support is going to come, and it might just be too late. Duelist Nexus cards are expected to be reprinted in the 2024 tins, so Nightmare Magician should be reprinted in there as well. If we do get some crazy illusion support, then the cards would have to make Nightmare Magician relevant before then in order to take advantage of such a spike, and there's only so many products that we're going to see come out before then. I actually think that looking at the quarter century printing is probably a better bet. Yes, it does cost more per card, but its price should be unaffected by reprinting the card in an easily accessible rarity. Other than that though, I wouldn't be looking at holding on to too many copies, since I think it's unlikely that the card becomes meta relevant anytime in the near future. Alright, so one card I want to talk about really quickly that we should all know, it's SP Little Knight. So SP Little Knight is definitely the best extra deck monster in the game right now. I barely even see any games where this card isn't made. The fact that it can banish any problem card, as well as function as an interruption on your opponent's turn, is pretty crazy, and the card is even run in multiples in a lot of extra decks with how versatile and useful it is. What I want to make note of here is the upward trajectory that we've seen from SP Little Knight ever since its release. I think that on release this card was around $80 to $90, we quickly saw it go straight up to $100 and then $120, and now even though Age of Overlord is several months old already, SP has continued going up and sits at a ridiculous $140 per copy, something that we haven't seen from a core set secret rare since the peak price of Access Code Talker. I think that the absurd thing is that SP probably hasn't reached its peak yet. When I was talking about this card before, we talked about just how amazing the card is and how absolutely everyone would need to use it, but its demand wasn't quite there because we just don't have much in terms of competitive events over the course of December and January. However, YCS Las Vegas is in about a month, and everyone is going to need the card for that, and beyond that we'll have a ton of YCSs and Nationals coming up, all of which players will need to use SP for. The one saving grace is that the card is technically slotted to be reprinted in the 2024 tins, since Age of Overlord falls within the 2023 sets. The other thing is that we could see SP get that random reprint early, a way for Konami to go after that crazy high price on the secondary market. Those early reprints have been done in the past to hit the prices of cards like Aluber, and it'd be interesting to see if SP gets included in something like Rarity Collection 2. However, I wouldn't count on this, and if you're wanting to play competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! SP is a card that you're going to need to own at least one copy of. Be wary of a reprint, but for now, I'm expecting this card to hit around $160 by the time we arrive at YCS Las Vegas. Alright, so for the last two cards, we're seeing them trend on the market because of one particular player, Joshua Schmidt. So maybe it's not just him, right? But I've been seeing a lot of players talk about the Earthbound Immortal Runic deck that he posted recently. I believe he has a profile for them over on his main channel, but it was actually built on his stream, and he has another like 4-hour video on a separate channel explaining the process. I'm showing just the main and extra deck here so that you guys can reference it as necessary. There's a couple of obscure cards currently trending on the market because of it, but of course we'll include a link to Joshua Schmidt's video down in the description. Alright, so the first card is Garden Rose Maiden, a generic level 5 Synchro monster. This card is really cool for the deck. It searches for Black Garden on summon, a card that we'll talk about later, but you can also banish it from your graveyard to summon back a Dragon Synchro monster. The card that Schmidt talks about in his video specifically is Coral Dragon. Now this card is a really cool extra deck option that hasn't really seen competitive play over the last several years, so it was definitely something unexpected to see. The card has two different printings. The original printing was an ultra rare from the legendary Duelist Sisters of the Rose set, and then it got a secret rare reprint in one of the legendary Duelist boxes. Now for either copy of the card, they weren't exactly cheap before. The card was actually pretty difficult to find, so they were between $6 and $7 for a while. However, the sudden demand for the card has caused both cards' prices to jump to where either version is going to cost you around $10 to $12. Now, outside of Earthbound Immortal Runic, this card probably isn't going to see much play anywhere else. However, the card's limited availability is definitely going to keep the card's price high, especially when you remember that the rest of the deck should be relatively cheap to put together. This is something that's probably really easy to overlook. I have like a whole box of sealed promos and such, and I had a couple of these in there that I had completely forgotten about, so keep your eyes open for this card and just offload it as it's necessary. And finally, the last card we're looking at is the card associated with Garden Rose Maiden. It's Black Garden. This card is a really old field spell that came out back in Crossroads of Chaos. Kind of a weird card. It's your search target with Garden Rose Maiden, and it's definitely a strong combo piece. Worth noting here is that the Rose Maiden can add this card from your deck or graveyard to your hand. So if you do open with this card, you can ditch it with Hugin and still get to add it back to your hand later on in your combo. So each time that each player summons a monster, the opposite player gets an 800 attack point token, and the summoned monster gets its attack cut in half. The cool thing is that you can blow up Black Garden and all of the plants on the field, including the tokens, and then summon a monster from the graveyard whose attack equals the total attack of all the destroyed plants. So typically what's happening is you're summoning a token or two, and then you're blowing up the board and reviving a monster with 800, 1600, or 2400 attack points. And in the Earthbound Immortal Runic deck, Linewalker, Garden Rose Maiden, and Coral Dragon are all monsters that can be special summoned back, making this an interesting yet effective combo piece to search off of Garden Rose Maiden. Black Garden has several different printings, including a few commons, so just finding a copy of the card to use should be quite easy. However, the card has two different holo printings, and those are the two more expensive versions. The chart that we're looking at here is for the secret rare printing from Legendary Collection 5Ds, an older version that definitely looks the nicest out of all the different rarities. The card wasn't exactly cheap, it was around $5 to $7. I know that the graph here shows a market price of $8.50, but the cheapest ones that you can currently get on TCG Player are around $25, with the sold listings coming in closer to around $20 each. The other holo version is the original super rare from Crossroads of Chaos. We haven't seen too much movement there, fortunately. Now this card is just a one of brick for the deck, so not something that you need to own multiple copies of, but it is a very niche application of the card. So for right now, I would recommend offloading the secrets and playing with the lower rarity printing for now. You should be able to buy the card back later on down the road after some of the hype for it dies down. Alright guys, that is it for today's episode. I wish you all the best of luck at your Phantom Nightmare sneak peeks this upcoming weekend. It's definitely going to be a fun one. I hope that you guys all pull quarter century rares. I'm definitely going to be looking for that Yubel mat, and also Poplar and Promethean Princess, I guess, as well. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch episode, please make sure that you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.